Okay, everyone get their donut.
One. So today, because Wednesday, I totally messed up the schedule. We jumped the gun a little bit and went ahead and talked about what you guys found as far as current issues go. But as a follow-up to that, and also tying into our study of the 5 stages of decline, hubris, born of success, and then undisciplined pursuit of more. So this happens to people individually too, by the way. I mean, this is, I think a lot of companies and organizations just track right along with the personality and the character of whoever the leader is. Mm-hmm. So, you know, you could attach this to someone's personal trajectory as well, but even churches go through this sometimes. And it's interesting that big, huge, seemingly perfect organizations that existed just a few years ago are totally gone now. And that's the whole book, How the Mighty Fall. But I wanted to get you guys talking here. What do you think is the largest company in America right now? What do you think is the largest company in America? By revenue.
Revenue that's in America?
The revenue does not have to be in America, but it's American-based company. Happens to be also the largest company in the world, and it does, in this case, happen to have the most employees. No, Apple is the third largest.
Like Amazon's gotta be up there somewhere.
Apple's fourth. Amazon's second.
Second.
So Apple's 2.6, Amazon's 2.8 billion. Apple has 137,000 employees. Amazon, I saw 2 different numbers, as low as 800,000 employees and as high as 1 million employees. That might be, the difference might be the seasonal people that they hire. So, but no, there's a company twice as big as Apple and twice as many employees as Amazon.
That sounds dumb, but is it the federal government?
No, this would have to be a non-government.
Oh.
Federal government probably hires more. I mean, they hire a lot of people.
Okay.
It's very common. No, Google is way down at like number 12, Alphabet.
Walmart, is it?
Walmart.
Really?
Walmart. $5.24 billion a year, 2.2 million employees. So they have been on top since 2014 as the #1 company by revenue in the world. So now, what would be some of the other top largest companies do you think in America right now?
I know IBM used to be pretty big, but I feel like, did they die down? Or?
Yeah, they fell off the list. If you go back in history, which I've seen historical numbers here, IBM was
like
on
a
the
decade
list.
ago, I think they were still pretty big.
In IBM in 1990 was the 4th largest company in America. By 2000, 10 years there, dropped to 6th, and by 2010, dropped off the top 10 list.
I say, because actually up by where Kenzie lives, close to Rochester, and technically I think it's in Rochester, there is like the biggest building I've ever seen, and it's an IBM building, and they just completely abandoned it, just left it.
Yeah.
Completely shut it down.
Yeah, if you had a job for IBM in the 1980s, or 90s, you were pretty much set for life. Mm-hmm. You were working for the #1 company in the world. So everyone thinking that IBM was the permanent standard kind of designed their management and businesses to follow IBM. So IBM believed in white short sleeve shirt, black tie. They all look like Mormon missionaries. You know, it was they had a certain system, very sterile system, which worked well for IBM. And so there were books written about it, and there were people who established their whole you know, and you think about the era, these are the people who ran IBM were post World War II, came back, you know, very disciplined people. So they thought that every successful company needs to be run that way. Well, you know, got to change with the times. I mean, they're not on, I don't think they're in the top 20 anymore. What else would be like something in every town that you might come across?
McDonald's.
McDonald's would be if it wasn't that different people own them. So McDonald's is ubiquitous. It's like everywhere, but you have different groups own different ones. There is a parent company that owns a lot, but then you can own a region of McDonald's. So that's why it would fall off the list. Ford Motor Company is not even in the top 10. They're at like number 13. AT&T is number 10 for this year, for 2025 revenue. United Healthcare, that's where we get our insurance. They're like number 8. Berkshire Hathaway, number 7 or 8 here, out of Nebraska. ExxonMobil, so gas, you know, fuel, is number 3. CVS, this was the one that surprised me. CVS Health is 2.56 billion, so they're just below Amazon and Exxon, and 290,000 employees, so only 1/10 as many employees as Walmart. So, but
That's crazy.
yeah. So, and there's some insurance companies. Costco is like number 15. The one that I think is pretty miraculous, ExxonMobil only has 75,000 employees, but they're 2.64 billion. So if you were to do the math compared to Amazon, which is just barely above them, 2.8 billion, but they have 1 million employees, you know, the amount of money made per employee at Exxon is 100 times more per employee. It's crazy. But you go back 10 years, and Walmart had hit the top. Walmart was number 1 10 years ago. Then they dropped a little bit, and then for the last 7 years, they've been at the top again. Exxon was number 2. Chevron Fuel was number 3. GE was number 4. Bank of America number 5. Bank of America has totally tanked. So in 2000, GM was number 1. General Motors, Chevrolet. Walmart was number 2. So Walmart now has been in the top 10 for 20 years. Exxon number 3, so Exxon's been in the top 10 for 20 years. Ford, GE, IBM was number 6 in 2000. Then 1990, the year I graduated high school, number 1 company, General Motors, and number 2, Ford Motor Company, number 3, ExxonMobil. So America's dependence on vehicles is just unbelievable. You know, 2 car companies and a fuel company. My father-in-law retired from Ford Motor Company. My uncle retired from GM. I mean, it was just a great job to have. IBM was number 4, GE number 5, Mobil Oil number 6. So ExxonMobil number 3 and Mobil number 6. So 2 cousin companies, basically. I think that's why they're up in the top now, because I think they merged. Chrysler was number 8. 1980, when I was 8 years old, ExxonMobil number 1, GM number 2, Mobil number 3, Ford number 4, Texaco number 5, Chevron Texaco number 6, Gulf Oil number 7. So, you know, all this oil, you know, all this, you know, there's all kinds of geopolitical things that led. So this is the 80s, and then of course, Desert Storm, Desert Shield happened in 1990. So, but you got 1, 2, 3, 4 of the top 5 of the top 7 are fuel companies, and the other 2 are car companies. So, and then in 1970, 2 years before I was born, GM, Exxon, Ford, GE, IBM, Chrysler. So all this to say that when we look at companies, some of the companies listed here have either merged or needed massive bailouts in the last couple of years. So I think it was General Motors took a huge government bailout. Chrysler has taken a huge government bailout. I believe Ford did not take a bailout. I think they're the only American company that didn't take a bailout. But the government literally loaned them interest-free money, I think, to pay their bills and stuff and kind of get themselves. And this is a for-profit company. But they're so big that if they were to fail, if they were to go bankrupt, it would hurt the entire American economy. Because so many people would lose their jobs. So many people's investments would tank. So the American government felt like instead of letting it die of natural causes, go in and bail it out. Kind of interesting that our tax dollars would do that, but wiser people know better. But these are not the largest companies in history. So there's I believe a Saudi company right now that would be considered one of the largest companies in history. I want to show you. So if you think about it would be unfathomable for us after looking at these numbers. So you got 20 straight years of 4 or 5 of these companies showing up in the top 10 for any of those companies to disappear. Yet it happens, and the companies are at the very top. Even Walmart could be gone by the time you guys have kids. Let's see. So this is an interesting article here. So world's biggest companies in history, MasterCard, and this is market capitalization. I think this is adjusted for what our so if it was $1 in 1950, it'd be worth $3 today. So they adjusted it for market capitalization, right? So MasterCard, Procter and Gamble, of course, they own all the soap and a bunch of food companies and stuff like that. Bank of America, Walmart, is not the biggest in history, but they happen to be the biggest in the last 20 years in America. Johnson & Johnson, they own a ton of different manufacturing. Visa, JP Morgan, Berkshire Hathaway, still at the top. Alibaba, which is like the Amazon of Asia. Facebook, which doesn't even show up on the list this year. So Amazon, and Amazon's actually still growing. Alphabet's still growing but Alphabet, market capitalization 931. Microsoft 1.2, Apple 1.3. These are the biggest ones. Saudi, Aramco, it's like a Arab something company. I can't remember what that stands for, but basically in the trillions now, like IBM. PetroChina, Standard Oil. So Standard Oil, 1911. So that's the company that J.D. Rockefeller started. If you ever watch the History Channel series, Men Who Made America, they do. I mean, it's a dramatized history, but they talk about all these guys that were like the kingpins of American history. And John Rockefeller started Standard Oil, and he saw that trains were going to need fuel, and that as cars were being invented, they were going to need fuel. And they discovered that gasoline was the waste byproduct of making lamp oil or something like that. And it was one of those we call a serendipitous discovery, because who would have ever known gasoline is what we're so dependent on now. South Sea Company in 1720 would be 4.5 trillion now. The Mississippi Company, 6.8 trillion. But the Dutch East Indies Company, $8.2 trillion is what they'd be worth, 1637. So, they refer to Dutch East Indies Trade Company in all kinds of movies, right? Like even Pirates of the Caribbean, I think they talk about it. We don't even think of the Dutch. They're not even a world power right now. They're pretty good at World Cup soccer on the men's side. And there's a lot of nice Dutch people here in Iowa, Pella and all that. But we don't really think of the Dutch as like any significant power at all. But just, a couple centuries ago, they literally were everywhere. And so I wanted to drive this point home, because when we talk about how the mighty fall, that would be the mightiest falling the farthest. So a company that was literally everywhere now doesn't exist. So I wanted to watch just a short little video about it. Right. So, that was a history lesson. Not the most thrilling information, but a company that big, what were some of the things that, obviously, it's going to be very easy to leave it out, but what are some of the things that led to their success? Let's talk about success first. So what they were, numerically, they were successful. We're going to set aside all of our, Christian values and morals, and we're not going to talk about the obvious things that were wrong about it. But how did this become the largest company in the history of the planet, in modern history at least? I mean, maybe there was something, back in the BC days, but modern Western history that's recorded, largest company. What were some of the things that made it so big? Noah, what do you think?
Their centralized government, or the support that they had from them.
Yeah, so they definitely, as he said, they couldn't have done it without the government support, and then the kind of creation of certain things that made it possible. No one had done what they were doing up to that point. That's one of the things I think he was trying to illustrate, is it was very innovative. Some of the ways, so when they talked about, they started, investors, merchants would invest on what they thought the price of pepper would be 6 months down the road. Well, we do that now. It's called futures trading. You can open up the Wall Street Journal and look, and people trade on, I just listened to the farm report on the way, and I don't understand most of it, but they're talking about, what cutouts of beef and pork versus hogs versus wheat futures and stuff, and people trade on what they think, where they think the price is going to be at a certain date. So they invented that innovation. What else?
Like you said, they were the only ones in it. So it's just like, if you're on the top and you have the support, others can't rise to challenge you. And if somebody did, they just cut them off.
Yeah.
Like, literally.
So monopolization in the U.S., our federal government has done an okay job of breaking up monopolies. If there was only one car company, they could charge what they want, and you would have no accountability for like quality or safety, whatever. But because there's at least two, which fits into our economic system, you have competition and things like that. And so our government doesn't like it when one company owns everything. That's why when there's a deal between two companies merging or one buying another, and there's billions of dollars on the table. So like, let's say if, like when Alphabet, I think when they bought Google, or they bought YouTube, whichever one they bought, one company, it had to go to the Congress first to be approved. When big banks merge, that's the one where they really, they watch over it. If two of the largest banks wanted to merge, they wouldn't be able to do it unless they have congressional approval. And I don't know what the rules are on that. Automakers, same thing. Fuel companies, same thing. So we try to break up. They had a huge problem up until the 1980s. There was really only one telecommunications provider in America, and it was called Bell Telephone, right? They called it Ma Bell because she was the mother of all companies. And they ended up, Congress had to step in and break up the Ma Bell monopoly so that there became Southwestern Bell, and there became all these different smaller phone companies. So, and that was before the age of the internet and everything. What else made them so, become the biggest company in history?
Disregard for human.
Yeah, I mean, they did. So, again, we all agree some of the things they did were awful. But if you could check your morals at the door and justify anything, if profit was the ultimate goal and there's no accountability, then of course you would torture, enslave, if profit's the goal, if the ultimate goal is just to make more money. And they were trying to achieve their ultimate goal. So even though, they were supposed to be a Christian country, right? They're supposed to be a Christian nation. There were Protestants and Catholics in the Netherlands. So What else?
Their ability to eliminate competition.
Yeah, so, and they did it a couple different ways. Some were more immoral, obviously, like literally torture British traders to leave their area. Some were savvy business deals that probably would be ethical, and some were unethical contracts with like abandoning people and stuff like that. But basically, they were able to go into places and have zero competition, so they owned that piece of the market. So.
I was gonna say they were kind of able to, like, with eliminating competition, they were kind of able to set their own profit margins in a way, you know what I mean? Because those other companies, the prices kept, or the need for it kept going up, and so then their prices kept going down for competition, so their profits kept going down, so that like ruined them. But for the VOC, they could just set their profits wherever they wanted them, and just make sure they continue to go up since they had that monopoly.
Yeah, there's been a recent, much smaller illustration of that. So the company that made EpiPens, you know what an EpiPen is, like an allergic reaction. If you had to buy an EpiPen, even with insurance, some people were paying $600 to $1,000 for one EpiPen. But the cost of manufacturing an EpiPen was like $1 or something like that. And if you didn't have insurance, and this is a life saving, so it's not a, it's not there are no other EpiPens, so there was no other company that sold that in America. And there was no other way to get them other than through them. So there's no generic version. And so they had a monopoly on it, and they were charging so much. And I believe maybe 3 or 4 years ago, the federal government stepped in and made it lower the price.
Yeah.
Because it was life-saving, right?
I was gonna say, because so it was one company that purchased it and jacked it up because it was like the only of its kind. And so in 2007, you could buy it for $57. And then it jumped to over 500 nowadays.
Yeah, my sister-in-law, they live in China, and one of her kids is severely allergic to everything. And their insurance didn't cover it, so they'd come back to the States and have to pay cash. I think they paid over $1,000 a shot. And you always have to get 2, because if you're the kind of person that needs 1, you need 2. You have to have a second one, and it's usually scary 2 as well. So what else made them the biggest, financially most successful company in history?
No interest rates.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. So interest rates right now are as low as I've ever seen them in my whole adult life that I've been paying attention. But what they said is, so you had 2 competing markets. You had the English market, you had the Dutch market. If the Dutch would loan you 100, equivalent of $100 at 4% interest, and the English were charging 10% interest, of course, everyone in Europe is going to put their money into Dutch banks, which are going to help. It's basically going to, that what they call rising tide lifts all boats. It's going to raise the whole Dutch economy. So their interest rates, however they did that, they were able to independently decide what interest they wanted to choose. Now the world is a little more interconnected. It's a little harder to do something independently. One market will not go like way up while one goes down. A lot of times they all kind of go together because they all kind of win or lose together. They just in general, we talked about this in the business management class, globalization. So they became a success because they mastered globalization. They literally figured out a way to take really a small country, small population, with a small naval budget, and with a little bit of investment from the government, create a big enough fleet that was able to trade and wage war, and then spread it all around the world. And it's hard to get to Indonesia from here today. It's complicated. Can you imagine leaving Europe to get to Indonesia? And I mean, you'd be gone for years at a time. It's dangerous, whatever. But they effectively mastered globalization. I think all the maritime traders at that time, globalization is kind of like, we see a different version of it today. And so this whole historical lesson is about what you'll read stuff about the Spice Islands. This is all what that is based on. The Spice Islands are these different places. And this is before countries started saying, well, it's even easier if we just colonize. So if we just kind of kill off the local population or displace them and create our own colony. So there were Dutch colonies everywhere. But if you go to Indonesia now, me and Dr. Heron went to Indonesia about 5 or 6 years ago. We were there for a week. You don't see any evidence of Dutch influence anymore. When the Dutch left, they really left. So there's like no, it's not like in South America, you can still see influence of different European countries and stuff. Indonesia is totally different. Largest non-Arabic speaking Muslim country in the world. They have no love for Europe at all. So they effectively did that, and they got so big. So what led to their demise? So why did they go out of business 100 years later? Not even 100 years later. What were some of the things besides the moral aspects of it? Honestly, God just pulled the plug on them. But what were some of the things that led to them not being biggest?
I don't feel like they created like a strong foundation for their profits. Like just like pulling up a gun to a guy and say, hey, buy my product. I mean, yeah, maybe he'll profit for a little bit, but you don't create any loyalty, any customer loyalty at all.
Right. So they weren't. So it was short-sighted of them to dominate the Vietnamese people versus work with the Vietnamese people. That worked for one generation, but it wouldn't work for the long term. What else?
I'm going along with that, but also kind of what you're saying, like the moral side, but just time was changing and they weren't really changing.
Yeah, sure. So they got away with it for a while, but the world was progressing very quickly, and people were becoming a little more aware that, there are things you shouldn't do. That's why they felt more comfortable prior to colonization. At least it was like, hey, our people will grow. It's not just a military thing.
Yeah, because they missed out on the cotton trade just because they were kind of handicapped because the English had a better shot at being able to transport it and obtain it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They weren't diversified probably enough. Looking back in history, spices are a fickle thing. So you might love a spice, for one generation, and the next generation moves on to a different spice. That's their parents' spice. They want something new, and so although they did trade in multiple things, the real moneymaker for them was bringing the high-end goods back to Europe, but they probably weren't diverse enough. And it's a weird thing because at the same time they were spread so thin. It's a small country, small fleet, spread out, where it takes months to get from one place to another, to get back messages, to get back and forth. And they were spread so thin, there was no Little Holland. They had the settlement in Batavia or whatever, which was in Indonesia, but it's not like there was a Little Holland, halfway between. There were a lot of Dutch settlers in the Americas, but they were Americans. They weren't a Dutch settlement. New York, New Amsterdam was not there for the Dutch. It was these people wanted their own independence and freedom. They became Americans. They weren't there for the Dutch.
Kind of reminds me of like the Sears situation where it's like the arrogance of thinking you can't fail, and they already had an incredible system built. Like obviously not morally, but they already had the ability to do so much trade. They had everything dominated. They were so stuck on their previous success that they didn't turn that or kind of change their primary flywheel, like he says, into something better.
Yeah, I think that, so they already had all the systems. They had the routes. If they would have just adjusted. One of the things that Simon Sinek, who I refer to a lot, and we'll watch some of his videos, the Start with the Why guy, he talks about in his book, The Infinite Game, the difference between short-term thinking and infinite thinking. Short-term thinking is, what can I make now? Infinite thinking is, how can I sustain what's being made now for the long run? And he talks about the difference between Comfort and resilience. Comfort is, I'm gonna make a decision that's gonna help me today. Resilience is, no matter if things go up or down, I want this to be around 100 years from now. You know, that group of the 17 herons or whatever they were called that ran the East Indies Trade Company, Dutch East Indies Trade Company, they started making decisions that made sense for them at that time. So, you know, get as much nutmeg as they can, dominate this one island chain, you know, run out these other people. But they weren't thinking of the long game. Long game would have been, what can we do to establish permanent dominance, not just temporary profit? But it's really hard for leaders that are profiting from their decisions to make long-term decisions because they just want what they want now, and they don't have to worry about what's going to happen 100 years from now. So, and for-profit companies, capitalist companies, you know, they're going to struggle with that more. Whereas like an institution like Faith Baptist Bible College, people are always thinking about, okay, how do we make sure we hold to our values for the next 100 years? This, you know, faith-based institutions, more kind of ethical, moral organizations are trying to think of the long term more, whereas profit-driven, I mean, you get the money now, spend it now, and life is short, and so, you know, ultimately leads to failure of the system. So anyway, very interesting. So, you know, we might all be sitting around having a cup of coffee 20 years from now and talking about how, remember that one company, Walmart? Remember that? There used to be one of those like in every town. Whatever happened to them? I mean, seriously, we could be having that conversation. There are definitely companies on the 1990s list. Have you guys ever heard of Altria, or have you ever been to a Texaco gas station? Nope. They were in the top 10 20 years ago. So, you know, it could definitely happen. So we'll see. Okay.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to kick you out.
Nope, I was just gonna make a comment.
Make a comment. I don't want these guys to leave without hearing your comment.
There is a old Texacola gas station / oil, whatever it is, and it's been redone. And I think it's in Pocahontas. It's like, guy uses it as kind of like a collector's shop.
Oh, cool.
So I just did that.
The bustling town of Pocahontas. All right, see you guys later. Yeah, been there.